Recording in progress.
Good evening. Today is Monday, October 17th, 2022, and this is the Historic Preservation Commission. And we'll do a roll call, please.
Chair Haley,
Here.
Commissioner Dunlap,
Here.
Commissioner Keller.
Here.
All right, and our agenda this evening, if there's not any changes or comments about that, motion to approve.
I would move to approve the agenda.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then looking at our minutes from September 19th, 2022, any changes or comments on those?
I would move to approve the minutes of the prior meeting.
Second. I don't think I got a second on that last one. I think I forgot that.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then any public comments on items that are not on our agenda this evening? I don't see any.
I don't see any. We have
We do have-
one person in attendance virtually, but they are not raising their hand right now.
Okay, thank you. All right, our next item is public hearing items, and we have 555 County Road for a demolition review, and we will have staff presentation.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Okay, so yes, this is a case for a demolition request at 555 County Road. All notice was met as required. And just to start off some clarifying points, so you can see in the aerial view, there's that red box. And just to clarify that there's only one structure that's under review tonight. That's the one that's on the easternmost side. There is also a structure, it's not historic, it's not being proposed to be demolished on the other side. So just for clarity's sake and for the record, we're looking at that easternmost structure. So these two images are from the 1948 assessor card. You've got the photo there on the left and the footprint of the house on the right, and I'll get into a little more detail about that, but that's where we can start. And these are views from County Road of the existing structure as it stands today. So just to speak a little bit to conditions over time. So first of all, our Paleo West residential context has this as a national folk style of architecture. So it is very plain appearing, right? But in many ways, that's actually on purpose. That speaks to its history. So, it does have some of these architectural pieces that are emblematic of that kind of folk style that's associated with kind of the first half of the 20th century and sort of railroad expansion. And then we also have some information that's much more detailed in your historical background from Bridget Bacon about the possibility and really the likelihood of a historic move for this structure. So as you read, there are 3 oral histories from people who were actually born at Monarch Mine who have this structure being built there and then subsequently moved in 1947 or 1948. So we're taking that. I just wanted to make that distinction since it's based on oral histories and not on a written record, but I think staff uses those, especially when there are 3 of them telling the same story, as pretty good evidence that it's pretty likely that there was a historic move associated with this structure. And then also, there appear to be some additions in the middle of the last century. So that blue rectangle, that sort of breadbox form, was most likely the original form from 1947 or 1948. And then the additions are notated in red. So there's a porch on the front and then an addition to the south. And those appear to be, the notations were added basically between 1950 and 1955. So sometime within those few years, these additions and changes were made. But all in all, this form sort of represents, let's just say conservatively, the 1955 form of the structure. So in the building permit file, there was a patio and a re-roof. Those are the only permits that we have. Doesn't mean that's the only thing that's ever happened, but again, coupled with the information from the 1948 assessor's card and the lack of additional information from the building permit file, it looks like this is pretty close to that form that we see sort of from the mid-century. And then my final condition piece that I just want to note a little bit is you can tell from, and I'll go back a slide, you can tell especially from these images that the siding has been removed. So it was removed on 3 sides. And I think looking at previous photos from about a year or so ago, it looks like the siding that was removed could very well be the siding that we see in that assessor's card. It's possible to know at this point. But it's also possible that the siding that was exposed is also, the actual original siding. Can't know for sure, but there are a couple of pieces that kind of tell us a little bit of that. So one is that the original bread box shape has its own type of siding, sort of wider siding, and then the addition has a different type. So that kind of suggests maybe this is sort of original or near to it. And then the other thing is there's actually some infill on the west side and the north side. So you can see like potentially a larger window, a door it looks like on the north side. So anyway, just to give you a little bit more of that history. And the reason that you didn't see, or let me just say that there was not a demolition review for the siding. There was not a demolition permit pulled for it. So that's why it's coming to you in this state with that siding being removed. But just acknowledging and sort of describing that also gives us a little bit more information about, potentially where the original part of the structure, what it might have looked like. So I'll review our usual purpose of demolition review and the review criteria. So the purpose of a demolition review is to prevent loss of buildings that may have historic and architectural significance and provide the time necessary to initiate designation as an individual landmark or to consider alternatives for the building. Then the review criteria, there are 4: the eligibility of the building for a designation as an individual landmark, the relationship of the building as a potential contributing structure to a potential historic district, the reasonable condition of the building, and the reasonable projected cost of restoration and repair. So I'm going to mostly focus on 1, I'll note 3 and 4, and then 2, as we know, there are no historic structures or land districts in Lousiville, so we'll kind of elide past that one. So first of all, the age of this principal structure was constructed probably in 1947, most likely before, making it more than 75 years old. And again, as we've talked about, the structure was likely moved from the Monarch Mine as early as 1947. I'm happy to answer more questions on that date if you do have questions, but the logic is sort of embedded there in the staff report and in the historical background. So the significance then for this house is associated with Lousiville mining history in 2 main ways. The first person to own this property and likely to be involved in the moving of the structure was Tom Milo, who's a miner, and then also through that association with Monarch Mine. So it does have those connections. In terms of integrity, I'm not going to go over again the conditions, but you kind of understand like the change over time has been relatively minimal since the mid-century. So this structure adds character and value to Frenchtown and County Road and represents a common folk architectural style in Lousiville. This structure remains in its location and setting as shown in the 1948, 1950s assessor card notations and image. It was likely moved from the Monarch Mine, but this historic move does not affect its historic character. And then it appears to maintain the footprint and exterior characteristics from over 70 years ago. So property condition and estimates are unknown. There was an email from our chief building inspector about the condition but basically, we don't really have a lot of information other than kind of what you see right from the street and what you see from these site visit images. So, in conclusion, the HPC may release the permit or place a stay on the application for up to 180 days from the date of application. That would be September 9th. So that full 180-day stay would expire on March 8th of next year. And staff recommends that the HPC release the stay on the demolition of the structure. And I'll just briefly return to that slide with the purpose. So basically the reasoning here from staff's perspective is that the applicant is well aware of the current landmark incentives. We've had that conversation just in the last month when we've been working through this process, is not interested. And then, with the historic, certainly I think staff's recommendation and finding would be that it does potentially meet, probable cause for landmarking, but that we didn't see the necessity for recommending something above and beyond what the applicant's already aware of is possible through our incentive program. So that's why, you've got this recommendation for release of the stay. So that's the end of my presentation. Happy for questions. And also I just want to note before I forget that the applicant is here tonight.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
No.
All right. Thank you. And if the applicant would like to speak, you're not obligated to, but you're welcome to. And if you'll just state your name and address for us for the record.
Thank you. So my name is Garrett Mundeline. I'm the owner and resident at 555 County Road. I come in front of you today to request an immediate release of the demolition permit for 55 County Road, my and my family's personal residence. I make this request not only as a homeowner looking to build a functional, environmentally friendly home for my family, but also as an experienced home builder and designer here in Lousiville. I've been a licensed contractor in Lousiville for 25 years and have focused my work within a 10-block radius of my home for a majority of that time. Through the years, I've personally worked on restoration or renovation to save 8 homes in the Old Town area. I've consulted on dozens more in Louisville, Boulder, Denver, and the East Coast. There have been homes that I've restored where I consider the money well spent and the job overall a success. Addresses like 100 West Spruce Street, 417 County Road, 836 Rex Street, I count among the success stories. There have been other homes that became money pits, and the end product ended up not being what we hoped for in either design or cost due to the condition of the structure when we started. Um, Below, I have 4 of the homes that I've done through the years. 904 Rex was an interior remodel and then refinish on the outside. 836 Rex, same thing. We did some repairs on the outside. We had to do some minor structural work, and then we totally renovated the inside, but keeping the entire outside character. 100 West Spruce Street was in complete structural failure. We had to lift that entire house up, redo probably the bottom 2 feet of that house, build a whole new foundation for it, and then set the new house down and then do a restoration inside. And then 401 County we did a minor cosmetic outside, mostly interior. Future owners on that house did more of what you see outside and have kind of they've updated the trim and painted it. So we've lived at 555 County Road since September of 1997. We lived in this front house for several years, we being my wife and I, and built a straw bale carriage house on the rear of the property in 2000, which we were able to move into in 2001 when we finished it. We rented the front house out until about 2 years ago when the floor system started to experience catastrophic failure and it was determined that repairs would not be feasible. The house was involved in an extensive fire which compromised 100% of the floor joists and a significant portion of the one interior bearing wall at one point in its history. And so the pictures that I have are just close-ups of the floor joists. You can see the burn. There is about a 1/4 inch to 3/8 inch penetration in those cracks in the burn for a majority of the floor joists. Every single floor joist in the original house has burns on it, but there are sections in the floor joists which you can see in both these pictures. These are 2 different floor joists. You can see like there's a little square that didn't get burned, but overall it is a compromised position. There are pictures later on in the packet that show more of those as well. It appears that the wood flooring that was sitting on the floor joist was removed and replaced with tongue and groove pine wood subfloor after the fire. This was then covered with a linoleum product that had to be removed due to its asbestos content. In addition to the floor joists being compromised, they're severely undersized for their span. They're true 2x6s. And so for that span, nowadays we call for a minimum of a 2x10. They also are installed at 26-inch on centers at their closest. Some of them are farther apart than that, instead of the 16-inch on center that they would be required. The primary support beam that runs perpendicular down the center is also undersized and has already experienced a catastrophic failure. The state of the existing structure, along with the method of framing used, would not withstand any attempt to lift or otherwise relocate the structure and would ultimately result in collapse and/or injury. So right now, if you walk into the front room, it's a 4-room house. There's a living room, kitchen area, bedroom, and bathroom. If you walk into the largest room in the front, you cannot walk in the front door because it will collapse. If you walk in the side door and walk along the back side of it, you can make it across without that floor coming in. But it is in bad shape at this point and has been for about a year. There are two parts to this small structure. Amelia kind of touched on this a little bit. The original house was placed on a foundation with a cellar below. At some point later on, a solid concrete slab was poured and an 8-foot wide addition was added to the length of the south side of the house. This addition was converted to a bathroom and kitchen at some point even later in its history of the structure. While the historical report seems to indicate the addition was done early in the timeline, personal testimony from James Vincent Jr., and he's a nephew of Maggie Sparks, the owner right before Tom and Rosemarie Bennett. He still lives here in town. Was that his father poured the concrete foundation that makes up the addition on the left side between 1954 and 1955. James Vincent Jr. reminisced about removing the framing of the addition with his father as a teenager and rebuilding it with plumbing for the bathroom and kitchen for his aunt. He was born in 1958, so that means if he was doing it as a teenager or preteen, that puts him somewhere between 1968 1974. The materials that we found in this part of the structure has wooden fiberglass insulation that are indicative of the late 60s, early 70s. The original structure on the north side has no insulation, which would be expected from the time period of that house. And the presence of fiberglass would also indicate this part of the structure, the south side, is not original. The structure was already reviewed and approved for demolition in 2007 by the Historical Preservation Committee and noted on the PUD development plans recorded in 2010 as being required by City Council to be demolished. At a later point in time, we went through a amendment to that PUD requesting for a timeline change. It was documented as a demolition removal change, which is part of the reason why we're here tonight. As such, when my family and I got to the point where we could afford to remove the structure and build our new home in its place, I reached out for instruction for a demolition permit with the city. This is with the understanding that we've already been through this whole process. They told me that staff had informed me at the time that in order to put in for that demolition permit, I needed to have a permit from the Department of Health from the state of Colorado. So I went down, applied for that. They require the asbestos testing, and it needs to be cleared from asbestos before they will give you that demolition permit. I went through that process. The company that tested it removed the siding, removed the linoleum from inside, and removed some points in drywall mud from the inside of the building. That was done between December and February of this last year. So I received a clearance from the state of Colorado to proceed with the demolition, at which time I moved forward with the demolition permit process with the city of Lousiville. It was then that I was notified it was the opinion of the current planning staff that I'd be required to go in front of HPC again for another review. I feel it's important to relay the process that I went through, since without that background, it might appear that it might not be apparent that I followed every request, process, and step that I've been advised by city staff. Regarding criteria, staff comments say the structure meets the preservation criteria for Section 1, Part C. I would disagree that it meets this criteria, since staff has advised that there's strong evidence that the building was moved to this site, and there's also strong evidence that the south portion of the building was rebuilt in the late 60s, early 70s. If you look at my long history as a designer and builder in Lousiville, you'll see the care that I take in preserving historical structures and the history itself whenever possible. The entire development to the north of my house is called Parbois Place. When I bought that property originally in 2007, 2006, the name Desiree Parbois was nowhere, could be found nowhere in the city of Lousiville. In doing my historical research, I found that name and found the importance of this person and how much they did in town, and therefore moved forward with naming that development and moving forward. That's just one small part of a lot of the items that I've dealt with. I could go on and on for a long time discussing a lot of those intricacies throughout the different projects. My wife and I looked long and hard at all of our options. We did initially want to try to save the structure and incorporate it into a new structure. Unfortunately, the only option that we realized would work is a demolition of this existing structure. We have documented the interior and exterior of the structure in photographs and notations for our own personal records, and I'm more than happy to share this with the museum. We simply request that you release a demolition permit so my family and I can move into the next chapter of our life and into our forever home. The last part of the packet just shows different pictures from inside. So the first picture is you're looking at about a 2.5-inch beam that supports all the floor joists. It looks like at one time they had a pipe running through that area. This goes near a coal chute, so I don't know if it had something to do with the coal chute. But that has broken and has collapsed several inches. The next picture is, you can see the material differentiation. This is looking at the west side of the building, the back side. You can see where the addition was put on. You can see the fiberglass in there, and you can see the wood design is definitely a machined wood that was put on there and not your historical hand-hewn wood that you see on the rest of the structure. Also, the next page, you can see there's masonry board on the addition, which also would indicate that it was done at a later date. Interior, you can see this building has been, even on some of the outside pictures that Amelia showed you, you can see a lot of the windows where there's large cutouts. This structure has been modified and redone so many times through its history. There's so many cut-up points, both along the outside walls and in the floor system. One thing that, if you go to the page that has the 4 pictures of the flooring on it, at the bottom I have the drop-in floor, and at the center wall ranges from 1.5 to 3 inches. It's really hard to get the perspective in here, but that center wall has collapsed down because I'm assuming the fire kind of climbed up that one wall because of the way they balloon framed it. And that whole area has dropped down where the floor itself is breaking and flexing in. Once again, demonstrating that if this building were attempted to be moved, there's nothing that ties the structure together, and it will blow apart. And then the last 2 pictures are looking from the cellar up to the floor joist. And once again, you can see the burns in the floor joist and how far apart the spacing is. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. That's very helpful. All right, we will have any public comment on this demolition. We have emails that have come in, if anyone needs to read those. It's also been submitted to public record. And then we have 2, do I call these up now, I guess, instead of just random? So Larry Dorsey, if you would like to speak, and again, just speak, just say your name and address for the record.
All right, thank you. My name is Larry Dorsey. I live in Superior, 315 Castellon Place in Superior. And I came tonight to lend support for any possible way to preserve the house, as I am involved with a lot of historic preservation. The previous presentation did add an awful lot of information that I wasn't aware of. I was hoping that you might be able to do something that would kind of parallel what we did in Superior. We had an industrial mine camp house that had been moved off-site and was donated by the developer to the town of Superior, which we moved back to Superior, and it became our historic museum. And unfortunately, it was destroyed in the Marshall Fire, and we're in the process of rebuilding it now. But it seemed to me like a good idea might be to somehow relocate this little building to maybe a Louisville City Park or whatever, and have it there as an example of this folk way of doing things back in the day when they could literally put a house on a moving truck and dollies and bring it over to some other place and start over again. There's at least 2 houses here in Louisville that came also from the industrial mine camp over in Superior. So it was a common thing back in those days. This mostly in the spirit of community and of historic preservation, make sure that everyone here explores all the possibilities of perhaps making it part of the future, give us a look into the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then Jean Morgan, again, if you'll state your name and address for us.
Hello, my name is Jean Morgan. I live at 1131 Spruce Street. And I have a couple of friends who asked me to put in their opinions for you. The first one is Leo Dvorsky of 612 McKinley, and he asked me to give his brief input. It was more history disappearing from Louisville. Sadly, old Louisville is disappearing. The next comments are from myself and Barb Hessen, who lives at 526 Lafarge, and she was born at the Monarch Mine Camp. She grew up 5 doors south of this Milo cabin at 411 County Road. Many of us in Louisville, myself and Barb included, hate to see this historic Louisville disappearing with all the buys and scrapes going on. We are proposing not to demo 555, but to move it to a city property and become part of our museum holdings. Someone has suggested filling it with coal miners' equipment and history. It might also be used for city events, social events, and tours. It may be possible that the current owner can help out with this project by diverting demo costs into stabilizing the floor joists and to move it to a better location. There are several suggestions suggested for the relocation of the Miners Field Trot Downer cabins, which could be considered for relocation of this building. And I've tried to think of some of them, but I'm sure if we go back and look at the records to find these other locations, there were more. But one might be south of the Goodhue Ditch where it crosses Main Street, just east of the Elks. The Hutchison Park at Jefferson and Hutchison. Cottonwood Park at South Boulder Road and Via Appia. At the west end of Old Town on Pine, by the silo as you go out of town, past the Old Town overlay. On the northwest corner of Highway 42 and Pine, where the coal car is now located. Maybe even in the north side of Community Park, perhaps near the pavilion. Or maybe Memory Square, and perhaps the Henrietto Park. At the Superior Asti Park, because of course they lost their historic building in the Marshall Fire. The park north of the community gardens, just south of the Lydia Morgan facility. Please consider a stay on the demo of this one of a few buildings of its kind in Louisville, and we can all come out winners by relocating, not demolitioning. And hopefully it could be stabilized and moved. Thank you, and I'll give a copy of this with all my ideas of locations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then we have one more public comment, and it's Jeff Meyer. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly.
And we have one person in line virtually as well.
Oh, okay, great. And we'll have them next. And if you'll just state your name and address for us.
Sure. Jeff Meyer. I live at 470 County Road, just down the street from this property. I walk by this property probably 2 or 3 times a day with my dog. I remember when it was occupied. For the last couple of years, it's not been occupied, given the state of it. It needs to be replaced. It needs to be taken aside. You know, served his time. So and I know Garrett and Tricia are anxious to build their new home. All the surrounding homes are beautiful, so there's no reason to save this. It can't be moved based on what Garrett just talked about. So I would agree with his request for the demolition of the property. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. And then we have one public comment on, I don't know if I can do this.
So I've gone ahead and allowed Mr. Cathcart to speak, so,
Do we want to finish the public comment first? with-
oh, sorry, did we?
We still have the one person online.
Yeah, so Mr.
Oh.
Cathcart is the one online.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I've
Yeah.
allowed Mr. Cathcart to
Oh,
speak,
that's
so if he wants to unmute on his end, he should be able to give his name and address and speak.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we
Can
can
you
hear,
hear me?
we can hear you perfectly. So if you'll state your name and address for us for the record.
Hello, my name is Mark Cathcart. I live at 1763 Sweet Clover Lane up in the North End district. For the record, I am a current member of the Lousiville Cultural Council. Um, I would like at least to hear the commission deliberate on, ways in which, this may be used, this property, and perhaps grant a stay on it while it's further explored. I do understand and did hear the petitioner or the applicant's comments, and it does sound as if it's in a poor condition. But it would be a shame to lose this last example, at least as far as I'm aware, of this type of property in town. So if there's any way that you could see your way to granting a stay while there's an exploration of what could be done with it, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. So that concludes our public comment portion. Did you have something else?
I just wanted to mention that the applicant has asked if he could make another statement.
Sure,
following the
that's
comment.
fine. So if the applicant wants to come back up and just state your name and address one more time for us.
Yes. Garrett Mundelein, 555 County Road. I did just want to address the comments regarding the last of its kind. I've been involved, as I said in my presentation, with several. To be honest, going through this process is the first time I've heard this referred to as a national design. But most of the homes that I've dealt with in Old Town Louisville have this similar design, so this national design. You can look at the pictures I gave for 904 Rex, 836 Rex, Spruce, and County, 401 County. One of the comments was talking about Barb Heston, who lives at 411 County. I did the restoration at 401 County, which is on the left side of her house, and I did the restoration on the house to the right of hers as well. This is down the street from that. Out of, I'm going to guess, 10 homes that we've encountered over the past 25 years that I've reviewed, we've saved at least 8 of those. Moving this house would be similar to moving a house that was built out of a pillar of salt. The way it's sitting there right now, the moment you start moving things, everything will start crumbling. The cost for doing that would be astronomical. I mean, if I had to guess off the top of my head, it would be well over $100,000 because you'd have to go through chemically and bond all this stuff together and then bring in a whole new structure to adhere to it. And so just, I understand, and my wife and I pained and looked at this as well. So I'm immersed in it and I understand it. It's very easy for someone who hasn't even seen this house up close to say, well, we should save that. I'd like to see it. It's not viable. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we will bring it back for discussion with the commission.
I really appreciate all the public comment. It really helps reinforce that we as a community want to do historic preservation where we can of places like this. I think in the time I've been on the commission, I've never seen as much interest in the disposition of one property. So I really appreciate that. Mostly the email, the offline comment we got was to go ahead and allow the demolition, and the and to match with some of the speakers here, people would like to see a way to move it if possible. We still have sort of a moving project underway with the miners' cabins that we're helped with by Gene, and I really liked the one successful project we had where we moved a house from Lincoln onto Lafarge, I think, and in that case, though, we had a plan to do that, and a need that there were people who could put that together and did. This seems a little more difficult.
And I think that's, I think the structural information has been really helpful, just understanding the current conditions of just the structural integrity of the house as far as moving it specifically. And I think it's helpful that the city has done some moving as far as the two that Commissioner Dunlap referenced, because I think we saw the cost and the complications of finding a spot, and that's what concerns me with moving this project, with this house specifically, aside from the condition. That's a whole other piece, but we had a really hard time finding a spot for those two mining cabins, and I just feel like this is a larger, even a larger structure, and it's going to be like harder to maintain. How are we going to use it? Who's going to take care of that? There has to be staffing, there has to be funds for programs and all that stuff. So that's my main concern, is finding a spot and understanding all the resources that would go into maintaining that is just, and this might not be the best structure to use those resources on, I think is my hang up with potentially moving this. So anyway, that's as far as the moving piece. I just don't know that this structure is the one that we would necessarily want to pour all those resources into. But I think as far as just to go through the checklist, like for sure it's 50 years or older, and even if it was moved, Lousiville is unique in our program because we do moving houses as part of our history. So the moving of a house doesn't affect its qualification for that. And the architectural integrity, it's kept its structural shape and general size and window placements and everything for at least 50 years or more. So those two are definitely there. And then there is significant social history as far as being connected to the Marshall mine and Tim Milo, and he owned it for a long time. There's a lot of history there. So I think that's the hard thing, is it's not, it definitely meets our qualifications, but a large part too is the kind of general repair and condition of the home. So, and the fact that no one has been able to live in it. I mean, there has to be some major structural work to be done before any use, before it's moved or lived in or anything. So.
One of the items that staff pointed out in whether the house would qualify for keeping or landmarking was if this is in a reasonable condition. And I'd have to think that burned floor joists would sort of push it out of being reasonable condition.
We don't know what it would cost to actually
Yeah.
to replace that. I mean,
It's obviously a subjective statement, reasonable, but that one's tougher. Keith, as an engineer, you have a thought on it?
Yeah, Gary, thank you. I was just thinking the same thing. I live on a historic landmark home on Jefferson Avenue, which was built in 1895. Fortunately, though, there was no fire, and the structure is much more robust than this one. And after seeing the condition of the home, the engineer in me says there's only two options for this home. It's either demolish it or move it. And the historian in me would love to see it moved. I'd like to keep it, and maybe there's a way of moving just the facade at the front of it. I don't know. But it would be a considerable amount of money. So I think that's the only option, is to move it, part of it or all of it. And as the owner said, it's like a pillar of salt. Unless you shrink wrap the whole thing and moved it, I'm not sure how else you keep it together. So it's kind of a catch-22, in my opinion.
I guess that one of the city building inspectors had looked at that, and that's an official part of the evaluation, I assume.
No, we typically don't have the building inspector look at the property. The applicant asked the building inspector
Oh, I
to
see.
come out. The
Okay.
building, and he did observe the charred floor joists and recommended that a structural engineer review the floor joists to
Okay.
ascertain the integrity of the structure.
I see, thanks. Well, again, I really appreciate the interest, the widespread interest in historic preservation in a place like this. But it looks beyond the scope of what we can do, to me.
I guess just for comparison, does staff have a rough estimate of how much like the mining cabins took, how much that was to move those? Or
Just the
fairly-
moving, or the moving and the restoration together?
We'll just say just the moving.
Yeah, I
just
mean,
to
I
kind
think
of-
just the moving, if I recall correctly, I feel like that was in the $30,000 to $40,000 range to do the moving.
For both of them.
For both of them, so that included some amount of stabilization, and then moving, yes.
Right. And then we also had to have storage, which we
Yes.
were able to provide, but like this would be too large to store like on city property sometime until we can figure out a place to house it permanently. Does that make sense? Like, as far as like we would have to have like we're going here.
We would have to find a place to store it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, or we would find a landing place for it. You know, when we were looking at the miners' cabins, it was, we were limited to within Old Town.
Right.
Since, just one point, is that since the last, renewal of the tax, we expanded, historic preservation funds could be spent in the entire city.
Right.
As with a majority vote of city council. So there is, the geographic area is expanded from when we were doing the miners' cabins
Okay.
investigation.
So that would make it easier as far as finding a location,
Yes.
because we were bound by that. That makes sense. And then, just as a larger structure, the one that moved from Lincoln, do you remember how much that was to move that one?
That
'Cause
was done privately,
and
so
that was
we weren't
privately, but
involved.
We don't know what
Yeah.
it roughly, but,
Although there were some preservation plan funds that went into that move, certainly.
Yeah, we might have a cost estimate, of the moving, but we'd have to look that up
Right.
for you.
All right. Anyone have any more to questions or discussion, or what are we thinking so far?
I guess I'm thinking with the fire damage, uh, the lack of destination for it, that we should probably remove the stay.
I think too, I greatly appreciate the like the public input and the desire to have this saved. I think though, like part of me thinks we have other homes that are very similar to these mining cabins, specifically Lafarge area and some other homes that if we have community support that wants to save these type of houses, like we need to go talk to neighbors and community members that have these homes that are in good repair and that are lived in and well taken care of, and get those landmarked to save them, instead of possibly us putting a lot of resources into this specific home and trying to move it and repair it, just because we do have some other similar moved mining cabins that would be easier to restore and more prominent. And so I think that's kind of where I am too, of like, if we care this much about this house, there's other ones that are in better shape that we could put this effort into and save better, I think, is kind of, so I think with the floor joist and the general structural, I just don't think that this is going to be something that we as the commission can move or really, so that's kind of where I am. Do you have any closing thoughts or anything?
No, it tears me up to make that decision, but that's something we always have to come up against. I mean, when you're dealing with historic houses, you know, the condition is always a critical factor. And I think this one is not good.
Do you have a motion?
Well, one more thing, it hasn't been mentioned, but with the owner's interest in preservation, I imagine you would entertain a thought of giving the structure to somebody if they really had a use for it.
Yeah, if they could move it.
Yeah.
I've done this myself. We're saving a house right now on Grant Street. We've been through this so many times. If
Yeah.
somebody wanted to throw a bunch of money away and end up with a bunch of crumbs afterwards, I would say, more power to you, try it. But I think money is better spent elsewhere.
Thanks. Well, I guess I would move that we remove the stay.
All right. Do you have any other comments, or do you want to second it? Do you agree? I agree. Okay.
Second.
All right, and we'll do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Dunlap,
Yes.
Chair Haley,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller.
Yes.
So I don't think we ever release a property easily. but yeah. And if anyone has something that comes up before, I mean, you are welcome to talk to the homeowner and community members but yeah, so. But I think, like I said earlier, we have a lot of really great homes in Lousiville that are not landmarked, and we have a great program with great incentives. And so, as community members, that's one of the things that we believe in as a community. So, if we can be proactive in talking about our program and getting people to landmark ahead of time, we can definitely save more homes on the front end instead of getting to this point for future homes. So just a plug for our program. If you talk to someone or know someone, like definitely tell them about our program. So yeah, but thank you so much for coming out, and we always appreciate. And I know for Superior too, like it's very hard to have years lost and to see us willingly let things go. So we're sensitive to that too. Like we don't mean to be dismissive or not value our resources, but we also have an obligation to our community to make sure that our funds and our resources are used in the best interest of our community. So yeah, so thank you for coming tonight. All right, and so we have.
Jean has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I'd just like to make a comment about the miners' cabins, the Trot Downer cabins. I think that they are located in a great place, and I appreciate the effort of the city and you folks to get them in our neighborhood, just half a block away from where they were originally located. They look fabulous, and I'm really thrilled that we were able to save them, and thank you to the owner who donated them, and I appreciate where they are. I look at them every time I drive by there. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and we thank you for not giving up on that, because
No.
you are the reason they're there. So
Bulldog.
yeah. Yep. So thank you. Thanks for coming. It's good to see you. All right, so our next item is 612 Jefferson Avenue, and that's actually been rescheduled for November 7th. So that'll be for next month. And then we also have 600 Lincoln Avenue, which is also rescheduled for November 7th. So those will be pushed to next month's meeting. And then our next item is items from staff.
Okay, thank you, Chair Haley. Okay, so I'm going to start with our subcommittee updates because they are few this month. We had a lot last month, and we have just none, really. So no alteration certificates and no demolition updates, other than obviously the one that came to the full commission. And then I just put in the referral updates, just more information about that facade improvement program. So nothing that affects historic siding, really, but the 700 Front Street, they are making a couple repairs to some of the older siding on their property. So if you see that, we've given them the information about how to do that in a sensitive way. But most of the siding that's being changed there is actually not historic. So anyway, that's the update there. We do have a few general items and then upcoming schedule. So for general items, I'd just love to introduce our certified local government representative, Lindsay, whose last name I have embarrassingly forgotten, but I'm sure she remembers. So yeah, thanks for coming.
I'm Lindsay Flewelling. I'm the Certified Local Government Coordinator with History Colorado. So just to give a little bit of background on the Certified Local Government Program, it's a federal program that's run through the National Park Service, and then each state historic preservation office has their own state coordinator. And our state historic preservation office is History Colorado. I know we were talking about extra acronyms before the meeting, but it's SHPO or the Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. So we have extra names for everything. But generally, History Colorado. And in Colorado, we have 67 certified local governments, and Lousiville's been a CLG since 2005. Every 4 years, each certified local government goes through an evaluation process. So this is your evaluation year. So that involves observing a Historic Preservation Commission meeting, and then I'll have a call with Amelia to talk about your preservation program. And then I also go through your annual reports and minutes that we have on file at History Colorado. I wanted to quickly talk about the benefits and responsibilities of the CLG program. History Colorado gets funding from the federal government, and we're required to spend at least 10% of that on subgrants to our certified local governments, which is really great. The money can't go anywhere else except for to the local governments. Those are no match grants because we were able to match that with our state historical fund money as well. Those go to things like preservation planning, survey projects. You can do archaeological surveys or architectural surveys, education and outreach, and any other kind of administrative projects that keep your historic preservation program going. So not physical construction, but projects that help with your preservation program as a city. Another benefit is that your local landmarks are eligible for state residential and commercial tax credits, and those are 25% since you're in the metro area of the qualified rehabilitation expenses. So that's a really great benefit that we have in Colorado. You guys have extra incentives for some of your residential properties, but the 25% tax credit for residences is really one of the only other incentives that residential property owners have. And getting a quarter of your cost back on your project is pretty significant. And those are, the minimum spend is only $5,000, so that's pretty much any rehabilitation project, roofing or siding or any sort of interior updates would qualify for that.
Is that, can I ask a question real quick? Is that a one-time thing, or is that any time they do something on it?
So for the residential, it's basically at $50,000 over 10 years. So you can do multiple projects over 10 years. There's just a cap. And then for commercial, the tax credits are up to, I guess it would be $3 million for the total project amount. So you can get a credit of, so it would be 25%. 25% of $3 million. Usually with rural areas, it's 1/3, so it's easier for me to calculate off of the $3 million. But so it's more expansive for the commercial properties. You get access to Compass, which is our statewide cultural resource database. So if you're doing survey projects or just curious about what we know about a property, you can access that and see any of the work that's been done in the past. And it could be, obviously Lousiville has had surveys in the past, but it could be like CDOT surveys or other agencies that have done survey work. Access to training. I'm happy to do or get other people to do trainings if you're interested in different topics. And then we also have some scholarship funds available if you want to go to Saving Places or other conferences. This year, there'll definitely be Saving Places funds available. I'm not sure about other scholarship funds. We'll just have to see how the budget works out. Technical preservation support. So if you had questions about technical issues, you can reach out to me and I'll try to find the right person to connect you with in our office. And then you get a formal role in National Register review and then a formal role in commenting on federal undertakings, which would be like highway projects or cell towers, things that are either paid with federal funds or licensed by the federal government. On the flip side, for CLG responsibilities, the first one is to enforce your own local preservation ordinance, and that's part of my observation process is seeing that you're following your own rules that you've set for yourself, and that's especially so that the public knows what to expect. So it's a fair process for everyone. Establish and maintain a commission. So CLGs are supposed to meet at least 4 times a year and have 5 members. Send meeting minutes to me, to the State Historic Preservation Office, and I read all the minutes and see sort of what common problems are cropping up and where training might be needed. If there's a good webinar topic that everybody might be interested in, I think, a lot of the local governments have the same issues. So it's good to be able to see the connections between all the different governments. Provide for adequate public participation. So, you have a time in your agenda for public comment for items not on the agenda, and then public comment during public hearings. And then if you're doing any kind of survey or preservation planning projects, you should also have some kind of public outreach element in that. Maintain a system of survey and inventory, so having regular survey done within your jurisdiction. Attend a State Historic Preservation Office approved training at least once per year. So it'd be one member of the HPC needs to attend at least one training per year. Submit an annual report. Hopefully Amelia knows that the annual reports are due on November 1st, so to get those in. And then an evaluation every 4 years. Did you guys have any questions about the CLG program?
Yeah. Are you part of the History Colorado organization then?
That's right. So, it's a state agency, but yeah, I work at History Colorado.
Yeah, I think we look more locally because we have this program and incentives for preservation ourselves in Lousiville, which is unique. But I've long wondered if people doing preservation in Lousiville utilize both the local incentives as well as the state level incentives, and I haven't heard that they do. Do you know, Rob, or would we even know that? Would it? It wouldn't. But it would, if you applied for those, it wouldn't really be known to our organization because we're separate. But I don't know if, other than just hearing talk, if people
I'm
do
not
that.
aware that we have tracked that in the past. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
I know we have had applicants in the past say that they can't figure out the tax, so they don't know. That's why I was kind of asking, like,
Okay.
because that has been kind of a question, and I feel like we haven't had a lot of direction of how to help them or what. So we just kind of say, sorry, that's not us. Like we're just the local. So
Okay.
so yes, I don't know if maybe just having something that we can, like a tangible thing that we can give to applicants is kind of an extra incentive of where they can understand like how to go about the tax process and do that. But I know that has been, not in the past few years, but in the past since I've been on the commission, for sure, people have felt like it was kind of there was a barrier as far as the tax.
Yeah. So we have
Write-off.
tax credit flyers that I can send
Okay.
over to Amelia. And then, there's 2 tax credit specialists in our office. So
Right.
they would be the ones that would be evaluating the project to make sure it conforms to the Secretary of the Interior
Right, because I didn't know
standards.
it was that significant. It sounded like it was more work than was beneficial, but that sounds pretty beneficial. So that's just one of those disconnects I think we should probably make sure that our applicants know to go to the state level too, because that's a lot, yeah.
Right, and then they can layer those incentives to
Right.
really make it
Right,
financially viable, hopefully.
right. No, that's great.
Especially, I mean, for the residences, definitely, and then any commercial properties could look at the state historical fund as well, potentially, so.
Now, for a structure for those to apply, those tax credits, does it need to be landmarked at the state or federal level?
The state tax credits, that's one of the CLG benefits, is that your local landmarks can apply for state tax credits.
Oh, I see.
For the federal tax
Qualifies.
credits, it has to be a National Register property.
Okay.
But Colorado state tax credits are
So
local.
what you're saying is the process that Lousiville goes through for historic preservation would comply with the state tax credit?
It generally would, except that if any interior changes are being made, then the interior has to be reviewed as well.
Okay,
So that gets reviewed by our tax credit people.
Yeah,
at
we
History Colorado.
specifically exclude interior, I
Right,
think.
yes, as you
Yeah.
should.
I think at the beginning you said that you get a quarterly report and you have 5 people on the CLG. Are we in compliance? Huh?
You're actively looking for other members, I understand.
I
so,
like that answer.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And it's every 4 years that we're looking at that. So if you have 5 members most of the time over the 4 years, then, that's fine. So I'm not too stringent, I would say. Well, thank you. And, I'm here as a resource for you. So if you ever have any questions, just let me know.
That's great. Thank you for being here. Hopefully you did okay. That's like nerve-wracking. I'm like, are we doing everything?
I'm also from Superior, so.
Oh, okay. Nice. So that's why you were hugging everybody?
Yeah, I was on the commission before I got this job.
Nice. Yeah, that's fun.
That's why I'm nervous tonight, because our CLG rep is here,
Uh-huh.
trying to do everything right.
Uh-huh.
I usually do try, but okay. So recruitment update. So this is basically just sort of a non-update update, but I've been working on language, and I do have a flyer that I'll share with you all. I can preview it now if you want to look at it, but basically it's just a 2-page flyer, and you can use the front half to send to your folks, post all around the town, however you want to do it. And then the second page just has a little more detailed information. So I'll send that all to you. I'm also planning to send this flyer to some listservs, and then also working with our communications department to do whatever the standard process is. They're just trying to go, I know other planners have done it before, but just again, trying to go that little extra mile. So if there are any listservs that you're aware of, any professional groups that you're interested in, I'll just give you the flyer, email it to you. You can disperse it as you'd like. I'll just show it to you because we're all here. But and then if you do see something where you're like, oh, I really wish you could put this in here, then please let me know, because I haven't set it up, haven't sent it out yet anywhere. If I can figure this out. End slideshow. Okay. So this would be the first page. It's pretty standard, and thank you everybody who got back to me about edits to the language. So most of this is actually based off of something that Kim had done before, but basically just having the application deadline, must be a Lousiville resident to apply. I put that on the front page because I'm going to send it to a lot of different areas. And then the second page that you all will have access to just shows, oh, maybe I downloaded 2 front pages. Sorry about that. So theoretically, oh no, here we go. So it shows the eligibility and benefits. So if you have any questions that you know of me about what the eligibility and benefits are, they're pretty straightforward, but you can find some information here. And then if you do have anything once I send it to you that you want me to edit, I'm happy to do that. It's not that hard. But I just wanted to tell you, we're in the works. We're working on it. November 10th is the application deadline. Hopefully we get a lot of people by then, but I also am under the impression that if we don't and we go through that cycle and we don't get anybody, we'll take a look again in January. We won't give up. Just continue trying. Any questions or recommendations or anything about recruitment? Said sort of a non-update, but.
I think it's a good idea to have something extra, because most years, I think there is probably a notice in the utility flyer that comes out that it's time that people can apply to the various commissions, but if people aren't looking for that, I'm not sure they notice. So to have something extra is a good thing.
That's the thought. Okay, so then for upcoming schedule, we have our plaque ceremony for 2022, folks who landmarked in 2022 on October 29th. It's going to start at 11. So I know that Gary and Chrissy are able to be there. I think that caps us off for the number of commissioners we can have, although it's a public event. So Rob, can there only be 2 commissioners? Sorry, I'm asking on the fly.
No, because it's more of a social event. I don't know what we've done in the past. Anybody who wants to come. If it's going to be more than 2 commissioners, we'll just post it as a meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the plaque ceremony?
Yeah, I don't know what
Yeah,
we've done
I think
in the
we have
past.
publicly noted it, that
Yeah.
it's happening. I'm not sure how we've done that, but.
Because there's no decision-making going on,
Right.
so we'll check with the city clerk just to
Yeah.
be safe, but because there's no decision-making going on, we're probably
Right.
okay.
Okay.
For 29th.
So yeah, I get Linda and Keith, if you're able to, just let me know, and I'll hunt down the answer to that. But yeah, so, and also just so you all know, there are some additional plaques. So I'm gonna make a call for like anybody who has a plaque at the desk. I don't know the history of those, so we'll just try to get as many folks as possible. We have 2 confirmed, so we'll go to 2 addresses on Saturday at the very least. Okay, and then on November 7th, we have our next commission hearing meeting. Just for the record and to clarify, this is in place of the November 21st meeting. So this will be our November meeting. It's early, but it's happening, and we'll all be there. Very excited about it. And then in December, so because December is yet another one of these holiday months, I just wanted to see if anybody knew already that they weren't able to make that 3rd Monday, which I didn't write down, so I don't know what it is.
For December?
For December, yeah.
We're at the 19th, isn't that that's the 3rd.
Oh, is that right? Look at that.
Yep, you're right.
Already on top of it. Okay, yeah, so I'll ask again via email, but if anybody knows automatically that you're not going to be there on December 19th or something, just let me know
Yeah.
sooner than later so we
That's
can
fine with-
reschedule.
That's fine with me, but
Okay. Okay. So, all right, so that is everything from me, items from staff.
all right. Any updates from commission members? Does anyone have anything they want to? All right.
Well, I guess on our outreach project, our coloring book project, we'll be meeting with Amelia later in the week.
Okay. That's good to
Have some
know.
Progress.
Yep. That's good. All right. Our last item is to adjourn. A motion to adjourn.
I would move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Recording stopped.